Greetings from Arizona. This is Tony Kuiper. In this video, I'm going to use the triple play actions in the TK7 panel to make some subtle yet significant changes to the lightest and darkest tones in some images. Specifically, I'll be adding contrast and detail in these extreme tones that are sometimes hard to reach. Before starting though, I want to mention that this technique was explained to me by my friend Daniel Anderson. I've linked to him in the video description and the blog that goes along with this video. He has some gorgeous work on his site, and it's well worth a visit. I'll also mention that I have flattened all the image master files for this video to speed up processing. The triple play, used like I'm going to demonstrate here, should be the last step in the workflow. It expands the shadow and highlight tones in the image, sometimes to the point of clipping them a little. You generally don't want to go back and do more adjustments on top of the triple play and risk additional clipping. The triple play will make your images look much better, but it's best to save it for the end of your workflow. The triple play actions are found in the TK Actions menu, which is accessed by clicking this button. There is a lights triple play action that affects the highlights in the image, and a darks triple play action that affects the shadows. You choose which one you want based on which tones you want to affect. For example, in this image, I'd like to improve the dark shadow tones in just the mountains at the bottom of the image. So I'll run a darks triple play action. The first thing that happens is that it asks me for a blur radius for a Gaussian blur. This is a blur that will be applied to some of the masks created. I use 20 pixels for a darks triple play and 15 pixels for a lights triple play. Clicking OK then starts the action. It takes a few seconds to complete as it makes several new layers and luminosity masks on the layers panel. When it's finished, you'll see that the image is unchanged. That's because the visibility of all the new layers is turned off. The triple play only has an effect when the user turns on the visibility of some of the layers. The blue layers are all curves adjustment layers set to screen blend mode, so even without an adjustment, they lighten the image. The S in the layer stands for screen. The red layers are curves adjustment set to multiply blend mode, so they darken the image. The M in the layer name stands for multiply. Each red and blue layer also has a luminosity mask associated with it, and this is also stated in the layer name. So for the red layers, there is a darks 1, darks 2, darks 3, darks 4, and darks 5 mask. The blue layers also have the same luminosity masks, but they have been blurred using the blur radius entered at the start of the action. So there is a blurred darks 1, blurred darks 2, blurred darks 3, blurred darks 4, and blurred darks 5. All these layers are in a group that can be turned on and off to reveal the overall effect. And there's a layer at the top which we'll return to a little later on. So that's the basic layout of the darks triple play. You just need to remember a few things. M stands for multiply and darkens the image. S stands for screen and lightens the image. And the overall effect increases as you move from the bottom to the top within a color group. Turning on the visibility of a layer with a darks 5 mask will have less effect than turning on a layer with a darks 1 mask. Because the effect can be subtle, it's best to zoom in to at least 50% or greater to get a better idea of what's happening. Also be sure to look at a part of the image with tones that will be affected, the dark tones in this case. Now, to add some nice punch to the shadows, which is the goal of using the triple play action in this case, turn on the visibility of the S darks 4 blur layer and the M darks for no blur layer by clicking in their eyeball squares. This is an S4 M4 adjustment, and I'll turn it on and off using the group layer so you can see what it's doing. And it might be all you need to do. just these two layers being turned on will almost always do a great job of adding some nice contrast to just the dark shadow tones and increasing detail and texture in them as well. If you want a stronger effect, turn these two layers off and turn on the S3 and M3 layers. But this might be a little too strong, and you'll need to lower the opacity of the group to lessen it a little. Or if you want less of an effect, turn on S5 and M5. However, that's usually pretty weak, and unless there are a lot of really dark tones in the image, you're not going to see much. S4, M4 usually works best for me, and that's where I recommend starting. Occasionally, especially with landscapes that have a strong tonal separation between the land and the sky, you might notice a very faint halo where the sky meets the land, which comes from the blurred mask. However, the triple play has this covered. The mask on the separator halo mask layer at the top has already found and highlighted potential halos. It perfectly selects the potential halo in the sky and completely protects the mountains. To remove the halo, load the mask as a selection by holding down the Control or Command key and clicking on its thumbnail. Then hide the marching ants. Select a black brush, and I set the opacity and flow to 100% for this. Click on the layer icon to turn off the mask view, and select the group layer mask as the painting canvas. Adjust the brush size and then make several passes to paint away any halo without affecting the dark tones in the mountains. When finished, turn off the active selection. Now the halo here is extremely faint, and I'm sure you can't see much happening in the video. But here's the painted mask. You can see how this painting through the halo mask selection targets the halo but leaves the mountains unaffected. I'll disable and enable the mask a few times, but you probably won't see much in the image. However, you'll at least know the technique if you ever come across an obvious halo in one of your own images that you want to paint away. If you look at the histogram for this image, you can see how the darkest tones have been stretched out a bit with this adjustment. This indicates increased contrast. But at the same time, the midtones are basically untouched by the S4, M4 adjustment because the darks 4 mask on the visible layers reveals the adjustment in just the darkest tones in the image. The last thing to do here is to get rid of the layers that aren't needed to produce the effect. To do this, simply click the lightning bolt button on the Combo or CX module. Now just close the group to keep your layers panel tidy. I'm going to stop here with this image and not do a lights triple play for two reasons. One is that there are almost no really light tones in the image. It's all midtones and darks, so the concept of using the triple play to improve the lightest lights doesn't really work well when the lightest light is really just a midtone. But also, most of the light tones are in the clouds, and sharper, punchier clouds don't always look great. If the subject is meant to be soft, like clouds, the triple play can make them look a little unnatural. It's always okay to try a lights triple play if you want, but if the subject is clouds, for example, you'd probably want to aim for only a small effect on the zoomed in image. Okay, let's do another similar landscape image, but it can be much faster this time. This has more mountains and less sky, but I'd still like the shadows to have more detail and contrast. So, darks triple play, 20 pixel blur, which the panel automatically remembers. Click OK. Wait for it to finish. Zoom in. Turn on visibility of S4 and M4 and check the results. Again, this is a definite improvement here, although I think the image could use a bit more darkening still. So I'm going to turn off the M4 multiply layer and turn on M3, which has a darks 3 mask that reveals more than the darks 4 mask. Okay, that's looking better, maybe just a bit too strong. So I can lower the opacity of the M3 layer just a bit. Now, just a quick note here, 75% is usually about as low as you want to go on your opacity setting for one of the layers. If you get down to 50%, you might as well use a more restrictive mask by turning on the visibility of the layer below instead. Because the dark area is so large in this image, even zoomed out a little, the effect is still obvious. Again, looking at the histogram, it's easy to see that there is increased contrast in the dark tones, and because I used M3 instead of M4, even some of the dark midtones are also affected, but I think it looks good in this case. Again, the light areas are meant to be soft, so I'm not going to do a lights triple play on them in this image. So I'll just click the lightning bolt, close the group, and call this finished. Okay, one last image, and it's black and white, and I really like what this technique does for monochrome images. I'll start off again with the darks triple play, 20 pixel blur, turn on visibility of S4 and M4, zoom into a dark area, and check the results by turning the group on and off. And I'm definitely liking this. There is significantly more detail and contrast in the dark tones, and this creates a lot more interest in this image that can often end up with minimal tonal separation if you don't actually go into these tones and adjust them. Clicking the histogram, though, there is now some clipping probably happening in the dark tones. But do I care? Well, probably not in this case. For black and white images, some solid blacks in just the right areas actually looks good. The clip blacks are merely serving to highlight the improved texture in the nearby dark tones. So overall, I think this adjustment works quite nicely. The histogram isn't showing many light tones, but I can definitely see some as I pan around the image, and unlike the clouds in the last two pictures, they're solid and with significant texture. So it's worth trying a lights triple play to see what happens. This is all very similar to a darks triple play. Click the lights triple play action, enter a pixel radius. I recommend 15 pixels for a lights triple play. Click OK and wait for the action to complete. And the resulting layers are quite similar. There are multiply layers that darken the image, and screen layers that lighten it. And luminosity masks on each layer, but they are now light series masks to target the lighter tones in the image. Because the histogram showed that there weren't a lot of light tones in the image, I'm going to start by turning on the S3-M3 mask combination instead of S4-M4 like I did with the darks triple play. I know I'm going to need a stronger effect since there are fewer light tones to work with, and the lights 3 mask on these layers reveals a stronger effect than the lights 4 mask. If there were a lot of light tones in the image, then S4-M4 would be a reasonable starting point. Turning the group layer on and off, I can see that this is just a subtle improvement because there aren't a lot of light tones in the image, but I can definitely say it's looking better. However, some of the lightest light tones are maybe getting a little too light now. I don't mind some clipping in the shadows, but generally dislike it more in the highlights. To make sure you don't blow out your highlights, you can use the following technique. Start by making a Zone 5 mask. Then click the Auto button to normalize it to a full range of tones from black to white. You can see how this mask is now black in the whitest parts of the image, and thus will protect these areas from the triple play adjustment so they don't get any lighter. Now I can select the group layer and apply the mask. In addition to protecting the highlights, though, this mask also blunts the S3-M3 lights triple play adjustment that I just applied. To overcome this, I can choose a stronger triple play, and I'm going to jump right to the S1-M1 combination so I can be sure to push through the group mask sufficiently to have an effect on the image. Okay, let's check that by turning the group layer on and off. And this is looking okay. The brightest whites are protected, but the light midtones are separating much better, I think. The lights triple play is usually more subtle than the darks triple play, and may be hard to see in the video, but what I'm seeing here will definitely improve the final image. So the next thing is to click the lightning bolt to delete all the unused layers and close the groups. I can then turn the two groups on and off, and you can see what a nice effect this is having on this image. I'll pan around a bit so you can see some of the dark areas too. I really like the added detail in both the light and dark tones and the overall pop that has been added, especially the way the small spikes are now more visible throughout the image. And even if I zoom out a bit, these effects are still obvious and will show up quite nicely in both online JPEG images and in actual prints. So that's one way to use the triple play actions in the TK7 panel. It really will improve the shadows and highlights on your final image, so definitely give it a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how even your best images end up looking better after using it. This is Tony Kuiper. Best wishes for good light.